In this video, I'm going to talk about wire strippers. Real quickly, if you like what you see, hit the subscribe button down below to stay up to date when I post a new video. Also, check out my website at playenabled.com for more information on switch adapting. I'm going to start by talking about the wire strippers that are included in many of the soldering kits. It's the one in the middle that's just yellow. The one to the right is one that I bought separately, and I'll talk about that a little later. For the pair that came in the kit, I found them frustrating and I really didn't like using them for several reasons, and I'll show you how to use them and why I didn't like them. First of all, when I got them, I used them wrong. I stuck the wire through the hole and tried to pull it through. That was really hard and frustrating and not how you're supposed to do it, but I wasn't sure, so I figured I'd give it a try. Also, what was frustrating was there was no gauge mark, so I didn't know exactly where the wire should go. So this is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to start by putting the wire up at the top and pulling it down to the desired spot. But again, there's no gauge marking, so you're going to have to figure out which spot. And then you push down and you pull out the wire. It does work, but if you're just starting out, it can be frustrating and you might get discouraged and think that it's you when it's really the wire strippers. Now let's talk about the pair I bought separately. I want to point out that mine are a little damaged. You can see those marks there. That's because I was using them for the wrong thing. I was using them to cut a copper plate. So if you ever see me cutting the wires with a tin shear, that's why, because the cutting part on my wire strippers are dulled. But theoretically, you can use that flat part to cut the wire. So in this case, it did work. I cut my wire down to size. And now I'm going to do it again with the red one. I put on the flat part and I cut it. Again, for mine, I have to put a little force because they're damaged. Now I'm going to unlock it using the little lever on the side and it opens up. Now I'm going to grab my wire and I'm going to put it in the correct gauge on my wire stripper. You'll see there are numbers and underneath it says AWG, and that's going to match up with the gauge of your wire. So I put it in, I clamp down, and I do a straight pull out. Let me show you that again. I put it in and I clamp down. I'm putting it at the gauge of 22. So I'm going to clamp down twice and then take it out so you can see. If you look, there's two lines there. That indicates that the wire stripper clamped down and cut the casing. So it's a good size. I did the right size gauge. You can actually hear it clamp in person, but it was hard to catch that sound on audio. So what you don't want to do is you don't want to pull the casing slowly and bend it, because that's going to inevitably pull out some of the strands. As you can see, it cut them and pulled some of the strands out. So again, you don't want to do it slowly and bend it as you're going. It's going to sever some of the wires. Here's how you do it properly. I line it up. I clamp down, you see? It cut the casing. So I'm going to put it back in, clamp down again, and pull straight out. No strands were ripped that time, and my wire is ready to go. So now I'm going to show you what happens if you use the wrong size gauge. This one is going to be too big. So I have a wire here from a jack I prepared in a different video, and I'm going to try pulling. You could see it gave me a hard time, and the reason I struggled was because the outside casing wasn't cut because I was using a gauge that was too big. There we go again. Same thing, it didn't cut, so it was hard to pull off that excess casing. You're going to sever it. So now what happens if I use a gauge that's too small? So I have it in a gauge that's too small for it, and let's see what happens. You can see it kind of severed some of the wires. So if you use a wire that's too small, you're going to shred some of the strands. So now let's see what happens when I use a gauge that's the correct size. It was super easy to pull. I put it in and I did a pretty easy pull. So let's talk about a risk of stripping the wire down a little bit more. So when you try to take off a little bit more, let's say you strip the wire and realize you need a little bit more. One of the things you can accidentally do, which I've done in the past is I've accidentally severed one of the internal wires. Again, that's because like I was nervous and I didn't want to do too much, so I tried to make it very small what I was cutting off and accidentally cut one of the wires. If you like what you saw, check out my website at playenabled.com for more information on this tool as well as other things you can switch adapt.